Okay, let's see what you guys thought about these questions. Number 1, about combat being sacred and then something something Facebook. This is page 36. So, first of all, like, why would combat be sacred? Saleh doesn't agree, right? But why would someone think this? Um, and the question also alludes to Cleric J. So the group I talked with started on page 35, and they noted that Cleric J has some kind of authority among the soldiers. Here, this is on the left. Cleric J's Persian was sing-song. He had spent most of the years of Saddam's dictatorship in Iran and learned our language. So Cleric J is Iraqi. Saddam Hussein was the leader of Iraq, but he has learned Persian. After losing 3 brothers and a leg, he was still fighting. The boyish good nature in his voice didn't let up even when men were trying to stuff their oozing guts back into their split bellies. I wondered if he'd ever had nightmares. Whenever he quoted from the Quran, a mischievous twinkle came into his eyes, as if to say, I really do know this stuff, and I am firm in my faith, but it's not where my heart is. My heart lies with the men at the Sadr. So we see that Cleric J is a fighter first and a religious man second. He does have a religious faith and he understands what he's talking about, but his heart is in the fighting. So there seems to be some kind of connection between religious faith and fighting in this war. If we go to the bottom of page 36, we have this. Cleric J had been pushing the men forward toward the village with his God is great bravado, while I stood back, camera in hand, marveling at his brilliant madness. So Cleric J is a fighter, he leads his men, and he encourages them to fight using the phrase God is great, which I believe is the English translation from Allahu Akbar. It's a phrase that you often hear to increase morale and encourage action. So we know that a lot of these men are fighting not for money, but for religious reasons. We know from the previous weeks that Iran is sending its men by saying that we have to defend the Holy Lands or defend the faith. So the war is already tied up with religion. So religion becomes a motivator for this war on both sides. Islamic State says that we are the true interpretation of Islam. Everyone else has to follow us. Whereas all the other groups fighting Islamic State say, no, you guys are wrong and cruel. We have to stop you to defend the faith. So religion is already very much part of this war on the high level, but here at the low level, even leading soldiers, religion is part of this as well. So the second part of this question is, how does Facebook ruin this sacredness? Earlier on page 36, last week we talked about an app. Turns out it's Facebook. So here, I smiled a lot at my revolving door of Iraqis. So like they come and go, who were especially enamored of this thing called Facebook and who watched me wide-eyed when I explained I did not yet have an account. As I'm sure this is how you will react when you hear that I don't have an Instagram account. Who knows if years from now the name will even ring a bell? No, years from now we still remember what Facebook is. But back then, in that geography, this virtual republic of Facebook was the river that connected the Arab warriors. They took pictures of themselves 5 minutes before dying. Then 3 minutes before dying, if luck and bandwidth were with them, their smile was making the rounds on the internet, immortalizing them just as they were about to leave the world. It was an odd, even batshit crazy meta statement on the last thing that might be thought sacred, combat. So here Saleh is describing how, like earlier, we already learned that most of the fighters were staying connected via some kind of app. Turns out it's Facebook, and that through this app they learned about who is still alive, who is dead, who is fighting, um, who has become a martyr, who has been like designated a martyr by the Iranian government. These kinds of things, this kind of information. Here we see the same thing, but from the soldiers' perspective, the people posting on Facebook. Uh, 5 minutes before they die, before they go into battle, perhaps they're already ready to become martyrs, right? Last week we saw Saleh say he can tell when somebody doesn't want to live anymore and is trying to die in battle. So 5 minutes before that happens, they post, and then apparently everybody in these Facebook communities um, think it's a good thing when somebody is off to fight in battle and maybe might die and enter heaven or something. And so the person goes viral in today's language. And to Saleh, this kind of kills off, the sacredness of battle, of combat. He says this is a batshit crazy meta statement. A statement is, you say something about something. A meta statement is when you talk about A, you're also talking about B. So here he's talking about fighters posting on Facebook, but it's really talking about how Facebook changes the idea of combat and sacredness. So the second part of this discussion question is why? How does Facebook change the sacredness? Saleh continues. We should have already known nothing was sacred. We were simulations. In other words, we're all part of the computer. We're all virtual. In another year or two, tourists would probably be roaming this very ground where Ali Akbar had stepped stupidly on a tripwire inside a school building while we took that village. So it's posted to Facebook. The guy goes viral. Everybody knows where he died, where he was fighting. And so Saleh is saying maybe in a few years after the war, some of these people will remember and they might travel over here and they might stop by and take pictures like any regular tourist. And tourism is mostly considered not sacred at all. So apparently Saleh is saying something about how this real event of death and martyrdom, which is full of religious meaning for the person who's dying, is celebrated, but at the same time, those celebrations are connected with or in the same scroll as all of this other stuff on Facebook. Turns this martyrdom into a simulation of a martyrdom. It's not the real event, it's the record of the event. It's not how you feel about this, it's whether you want to go visit as a tourist. And that makes it feel less sacred. We can also think about how, like, in between posts of martyrs and people who are going to be martyrs, you'll probably have like, wedding photos, you have vacation photos, you have posts about like shower thoughts, you think about things you think about in the shower. It's strung together with so many other non-sacred things. It's not treated differently or separately. And that kind of takes away from the sacredness of martyrdom, according to Saleh. And of course, that kind of makes sense, but Saleh already doesn't think that this is very sacred anyway. Um, he says that combat is the last thing that might be thought sacred. As we've been seeing, he keeps on saying that the war is meaningless and pointless. So here, what he's doing is he's discussing what other people might think, and he's pointing out why Facebook disproves the people who think that martyrdom in this version could be some kind of sacred act. And one way that he disproves the sacredness is by pointing out that Ali Akbar's death is stupid. Later on here, on the right-hand side, he's talking about Ali Akbar's death. To get taken down because you trip over a wire in a schoolhouse. What was he doing there in the first place? It was too close to the action. In fact, the schoolhouse was the action, and no sniper motherfucker should have been there. But he was. And therein lay the issue. Ali Akbar was the war in all its stupidity. He doesn't say this here, but also Ali Akbar dies after the battle. Like the enemy has been defeated, and he's going into the schoolhouse to check if there are other enemies, and he steps on a tripwire and gets blown up. So he really does die for no good reason. It's a very stupid death. So by adding this at the end of his thoughts, Saleh is giving an example of how combat is not in fact sacred. Conclusion, we were, in other words, ornaments. We are simply there to decorate somebody's Facebook scroll, Facebook feed. The sacredness has gone out from this kind of fighting. And, you know, in a very deep sense, this is true. Every time you post to social media, you are feeding the algorithm, right? You're feeding the corporation. You are decorating the product that is being sold to people. Why do people use social media? To keep in contact with people or to find out what other people are doing or saying. So the more users use the platform, the more money the company makes. So we users are literally ornaments for social media platforms. I don't have Instagram, but I do have Twitter if you want to, you know, follow me. Okay, do you have other thoughts about question 1? All right, question 2. Why do you think Saleh doesn't feel scared when Saeed points the gun at him? So the group I talked with about this question had some very interesting answers. We begin on page 37 when Saeed comes back to look for Saleh. So at the bottom left of 37. A week later, my eyes had settled a bit, and when Saeed came at me in the mokeb, so to come at someone means to come fight someone, I saw correctly only one of him, and there was no mistaking what he was about to do. His first swing missed. A swing is an attempted punch. And before he had time for a second swing, 4 burly Iraqi men had him by the arms and wrestled him to the ground. He was screaming in Arabic, telling them to let go and that there was a score to settle. So why is Saeed here? It's because of Zara the beheader. If you remember from last week, the woman who cut off the 2 heads of the enemy. Saleh was supposed to help Saeed interview her. Saleh doesn't want her to be interviewed. He has hidden her away, and now Saeed is back for revenge. And to find her. Where is she? So Saeed says, let's see, where is it? He grabs the AK. I'm taking you to Tehran. So the group that I talked with said basically the reason Saleh isn't scared is because he knows that Saeed won't actually shoot him. Um, and there are a number of reasons for how Saleh knows this. The first one very clearly is because Saeed immediately says, I'm going to take you to Tehran. He can't take Saleh to Tehran if Saleh is dead. So immediately he's undercutting his own threat. The second reason that this group gave is because, um, as we just saw, Saeed was held down by four men who apparently obey Saleh. He now knows that Saleh has some kind of authority here. So if he does try to shoot Saleh, he himself would very quickly get shot. And it doesn't seem like Saeed is the kind of person who's willing to risk his own life for revenge. He's too focused on trying to become famous and make money as a journalist. And the third reason this group gave is because it's in the middle of a war. Everybody has a gun. And most people have fought actual enemies who are actually trying to kill them. So by this point, Saleh probably can tell the difference between somebody who is actually trying to kill him and somebody who is just threatening him but won't actually kill him. He doesn't see murder in Saeed's eyes, basically. So he's not afraid. He knows that Saeed won't actually kill him. And that's why he says that Saeed, like a fool, jumps up and grabs the gun. Because, like, obviously he's not going to shoot him. So it's a useless gesture. Holding the gun, not holding the gun, it doesn't matter. Other thoughts on question 2? The idea that you can tell whether someone actually is trying to hurt you is a very real idea. Like we have a physical intuition of danger when our bodies and our brains know that something dangerous is actually going to happen. We feel very different about it. It doesn't matter if someone's holding a gun or like today. If anyone points a gun at you, you're gonna get scared. But that's probably because you don't have people holding guns around in your life. You can't tell when somebody is holding a gun whether they're actually going to shoot you or not. But you probably can tell if you are in an argument with somebody whether that person is going to hit you or whether they're just simply shouting at you. Like our bodies can physically feel the difference. We usually call that like a vibe or an atmosphere or a gut feeling, but it's there. So, you should trust your instincts. But it's even better if you don't find yourself in a situation where somebody is pointing a gun at you. Okay, question 3. What do you think Saleh means when he says it felt as if we were slowly being sucked into some evil? War, of course, is already very evil, but apparently something happens that's even worse. So at the beginning of page 39, they discover on the ground, I saw the pummeled, bloody face of a young man, maybe 19. You could see his beard was choppy, like he had been trying to cut it with a knife in a hurry. So, like this sentence probably doesn't give you a lot of information, like trying to cut off his beard in a hurry, but it tells readers something important about who this kid is. Islamic State considers itself to be a very strict, extremely strict version of Islam. So, like, they don't allow men to cut their hair or cut their beards. So if you see like a soldier on the battlefield and they have a long beard, it's likely that they're fighting for Islamic State. Not always, but it could be a sign. So here, the fact that the kid is hurriedly trying to cut off his beard means he doesn't want people to see his long beard, which means he's afraid that the beard will give people information. And apparently that information is that he is a fighter for Islamic State. He looked half-starved and ready to fall asleep or die. The kicking barely made a dent in him. He was done. He had the long, handsome face of a North African, and when I was told he might be Tunisian, I wasn't surprised. A van screeched to a halt outside the mokeb, and two men came running toward us. He's ours, we'll take him. So, look, anytime a van stops and men jump out of the van, it's never a good thing. It is never a good thing. So in this case, you can probably tell when they say we'll take him, they mean we'll take him and kill him. No one gave way. One of the kitchen guys shouted back, "He's not yours. We found him hiding in the mokeb. He's ours. Who are you?" They tried pushing past the crowd, but were shoved back. It was a standoff to see who owned the enemy combatant. He'd probably been cowering in some dark corner of the mokeb ever since last week's misbegotten blitz on the town. So Saleh is again criticizing they shouldn't have fought over that small town. And somebody going to take a dump in private had finally found him. The two men, from whatever outfit they were, like whatever unit they were, really didn't have a leg to stand on here. We weren't part of anyone's command structure. We didn't have to give up the kid if we didn't want to. What I didn't know then, and I should have, was why we weren't giving him up. I realized that with those two men, he had no chance wherever they took him. What I didn't realize was that he had even less of a chance with us. So this tells us that in that moment, Saleh thought that maybe he could save the kid. But only later did he realize no chance. Because if those two men working for some organized army wanted to kill him, then the men with Saleh, who were not working for some kind of organized army, would want to kill him even more. And he says that I should have known this. I should have realized this fact. So Saleh is also criticizing himself for being too naive, being too idealistic. He keeps saying the war is meaningless. Nobody does anything for any purpose. It doesn't matter. And yet he's still trying to save the life of this enemy combatant. And when he fails, he tells himself he should have known better. It is up to you. I turned around and saw the Najafi kid, his unlikely curly blonde hair caked with the dust of northern Iraq and Syria, whispering in my ear. You are Cleric J's man while he's gone. Whatever you say goes here. So this is where we finally learn why Saleh has authority here. The men see him talking with Cleric J. They see Cleric J giving him respect, and so they also respect him. The kid's whispering suddenly turned all attention our way. The Tunisian remained on the ground, coughing weakly. Ma, he whimpered. So the novel and, Saleh telling us this story from the future describes the fighter in a very pitiful way. It makes us want to sympathize with the Tunisian fighter. I gestured to the Najafi kid, who picked up one of those ubiquitous bottles of water for the fighters from right by his foot and took it over to the boy. I was not sure, but it felt as if we were slowly being sucked into some evil. Nearly all the men in that mokeb had had some kind of history with the Iranians going back to the Saddam days. It was a factor that carried cachet. And to be Cleric J's rep carried even more. So these two sentences, he's trying to understand why he has so much authority here. We already know that he is considered the representative of Cleric J, but he also says it's partly due to the fact that he is Iranian. In the 80s, Iran and Iraq fought the Iran-Iraq War. And if I remember correctly, Iran won. So like the Iraqi fighters would have a certain fear and respect of Iranians such as Saleh. So we see that, and then there's another reason here. It's also because he has been feeding these soldiers. And when you get your food from the same person every day, you start to like him and respect him. So that's a third source of his authority. But here we see that he gives the enemy fighter a bottle of water. Everybody else wants to kill him. Saleh is the only person who takes pity on him. We see his pitiful description. We see Saleh giving him water. So to Saleh, he knows you're not supposed to kill a helpless person, even if the person is an enemy soldier. But that's exactly what everybody else wants to do. So he says that it feels like we were slowly being sucked into some kind of evil. As the group I talked with mentioned, in war, yes, you're supposed to kill people, but there are rules. There are certain places and ways in which you are not supposed to kill people. This situation is one of those situations where you're not supposed to kill people. And yet everybody wants to kill the guy. So Saleh is feeling like even this last moral boundary is collapsing. And he doesn't say they, right? They were being sucked. He says we. And the group I discussed this with said that he does, in fact, include himself. Even though he is the only one to pity the young kid, he's the only one to give him water. He also feels like he's being dragged into this. And as the group noticed, after he says this, he starts talking about why he is their de facto leader, why he has authority. And, even in a military, it's not always the case that the leader gives an order and the followers mindlessly obey. Even in an army, the soldiers have to want to obey the order. They have to respect their superior enough to follow that order. Otherwise, you get like rebellions and coups and mutinies. So in this situation, if Saleh had said, we're going to save the kid, probably nobody would actually follow that order. Instead, Saleh would lose a lot of his authority because it would seem like he is so disconnected from the other men. So simply by the fact that he wants to survive as well, he wants to not be treated as an outcast, Saleh also has to compromise with everybody's bloodlust, their desire to kill him. And that's why we don't see him say, don't kill him. He probably says, like, take him somewhere, hold him. But on the next page, Cleric J comes back and handed me a Colt. A Colt is a pistol. Saleh, he's your charge. Do it. The men expect no less. So Cleric J points out what's happening. Saleh has said, like, take the kid away. he didn't say kill the kid. He said take him away. Therefore, the kid is now Saleh's responsibility. He's his charge. And everybody wants the kid dead. And because the kid is now Saleh's responsibility, it should be Saleh who kills the kid. That's what Cleric J is saying. And when Saleh says, if I don't, Cleric J says, this war is not a holiday, you know. You are not on vacation, which means you have a duty. You can't just do whatever you want. So if he has a duty to the men who obey him and the men want the kid dead, then his duty seems to be to kill the kid. And that's why he includes himself in this greater evil that everybody is being sucked into. Okay, other thoughts about this question? All right. Question 4. Do you think the sentence, this sentence is meant to be funny? Is it really funny? And why is the novel sometimes funny in general if you do in fact think that it's funny? So we earlier saw Saleh getting held down by 4 burly Iraqi men on page 37, right? 4 burly Iraqi men had him by the arms and wrestled him to the ground. He was screaming in Arabic. Okay, we have a clear image. Then on page 40, when Saleh notices that Said was filming their treatment of the enemy fighter, he aims a frown in Said's direction, and it was enough for the 4 burly men who had held him down before to do it again. So the first part of this question is this meant to be funny? And the group I talked with said yes, it could be funny. The design of this sentence, even going back to the first scene, it took 4 big hairy men to hold down Said. It's kind of exaggerated. And then this sentence is very concise, right? In the earlier sentence, we have like words like wrestled him to the ground. We have Said screaming. It has more detail. But here, it's very simple language. Who had held him down before to do it again. No descriptions, no details. What it's doing, it's reminding us of that earlier scene, and it's saying, replay that scene, do it again. So it's kind of like, it feels like a cartoon almost with this very brief sentence. Earlier scene, 4 big hairy men hold him down. Later, he gets up. Now they hold him down again. It's kind of like a slapstick kind of design. So yes, it could be seen as funny. Is it funny? Well, it depends on the reader, right? The group I talked with said they didn't really find this very funny. But I don't know. When I got to this sentence, I laughed out loud. I thought it was a very funny sentence. So, like, why might some people think this is funny and others not? One reason could be how you feel about the events, the plot, you know, the war, the fighting, the prisoner. If you feel like these are very serious events that are about life and death, they should be taken very seriously. People are dying for their religion. They're deciding whether to illegally kill an enemy combatant. Then you might not feel like this sentence is very funny. If, however, you are more like Saleh, who feels like none of this matters, it's all absurd, it's all bullshit, he doesn't care about any of it, then anything slightly absurd or silly that happens might make you feel like it's kind of funny. Another possible reason or difference could be in terms of the language. I was talking about like how much detail is here, the words that are used, how fast the sentence goes. If you don't notice these details about the language, you may not feel that contrast. When you juxtapose the two sentences together, you might not feel the connection, you might not feel the difference. And even after I explain it to you, you may understand what I'm saying, but maybe you won't feel that strong contrast. And that's partly why humor is subjective, because it's to do with language, and language is to do with how we understand the world, how we think, in fact. We think using language. Try to think about something without words. You can't do it. We think in language. So how you feel about language reflects how you think or feel about a certain situation. And humor is bound up with our personal viewpoints and experiences, in addition to our understanding of language. And that's why this question is divided into three parts, right? The first part, is it supposed to be funny? The second part, is it actually funny? We can intellectually see that this is supposed to be funny, and yet still we don't think that it's funny. If you listen to professional comedians talk about their job, they don't say things, well, they sometimes say things like, oh, the audience laughed or the audience didn't laugh. But they also say things like, this was a well-designed joke. This joke is very new and creative. So like being funny is not just about do people laugh. It's also about how you work with the language. And then the third part of this question is this novel supposed to be funny in other places? And I guess like the closest example of another joke is on the bottom of page 37. So this is after Saleh comes and tries to attack. This is after Said comes and tries to attack Saleh. He gets held down. He gets back up. They start talking. And then Said tries to convince Saleh to leave with him. And so Said says, what? You think you found your calling making lunch for the militias? And Saleh replies, and dinner. And after a while, I added, and breakfast. This is kind of funny, right? Said is saying, you're wasting your time here making food for these soldiers or these fighters. And Saleh's response is, I'm not just making them food, I'm making them food 3 times a day. Again, I can explain the joke, but that doesn't make it funnier. But I do want to point out that the group I talked with didn't laugh about the 4 burly men, but they did laugh at this sentence. So sometimes your sense of humor can change depending on the context, depending on how much information you have, depending on your expectations of the book or whatever you're reading. Now that I have pointed out to you that many parts of this book are meant to be funny, maybe as we keep reading, you will start feeling like this book is funnier and funnier. I also once had a similar experience. I once read a novel that was so completely boring. It was boring in an interesting way. So I kept reading to like figure out why is it so boring. And then I decided to like do some research on this book. So after a while, I read it again a second time while taking notes. And the second time, I thought the book was hilarious. It was like every line that I thought was boring, I now saw it as a joke. So it is also about your expectations. What do you expect the book to be like, or whatever you're reading to be like? How do you understand its author's intentions? When I introduced this book, I said it's about war and religion, and etc. And so maybe you're thinking it's a very serious book. But now that I say it's also full of jokes, maybe you will start noticing more jokes. So you can look forward to that as you keep reading. You guys have thoughts about question 4? All right, let's take a break. We'll come back at 11:10. All right. Question 5. Saleh mentions a kind of absurd waste that only an army is capable of. Like, why? Why only an army? Let's take a look at 46. So we know that Saleh is working at the Mokeb, feeding the soldiers. Um, it was the scale of the food waste that was a mindfuck. The Mokeb casually threw away enormous amounts of food. The kind of absurd waste that only an army is capable of. Sometimes when a village was freed from the enemy, and I stood in the back of the truck and distributed goods to the villagers, I imagined I was making up for all the discarded food in Arabia. But you cannot make up for that kind of waste. It was another kind of illness that went untreated because everything was ill. It wasn't just the Americans who wasted, we all did. We all were guilty. So we notice a few things here. He's talking specifically about food waste. He's saying that it's only an army would be able to waste so much. He's saying that the Americans also wait. The way that he talks about the Americans, he's treating the Americans as the standard for wastefulness. So it's not just them, which means it is expected that the Americans are wasteful. And then finally, he connects it to, I believe we can say that this is the illness of war. So how can we put these ideas together? The group I talked with mentioned that war is wasteful in many senses, not just food and resources. It's wasteful of human life. It's wasteful in human spirit, right? People focusing so much attention and energy on killing other people. And if, like Saleh, you believe that war is meaningless, then all of this effort is wasted. But what about food specifically? So we know that in order to fight a war, you need soldiers. And in order to let soldiers be able to fight, they have to have food. So wherever this large group of fighters go, you have to be able to give them food. Whether they are, in this case, in Syria, in Iraq, or somewhere else, wherever they go, there has to be enough food for them. Now, of course, not everywhere has enough restaurants and farmers markets to support an army. So most armies deliver food to their soldiers. The food follows the soldiers. Wherever they go, the food has to go. And that takes time. Armies move around, head counts change, right? Some people die, some new people join in. So when you send out the food, that's one thing. But when the food arrives, it may not be enough. And in the meantime, some of that food might have expired, gone bad, no longer be edible. So the safest way to make sure all your soldiers have food is to give them too much food. It's better to throw some food away rather than let some soldiers go hungry. The existence of an army is for one purpose only. It is to fight. Everything else is secondary to that one goal. Food. It's okay to waste food as long as it helps to guarantee that your soldiers can fight. And this logic applies to very many other things as well. Drinks and water. It's okay to waste some as long as you can guarantee that your soldiers have enough. Clothing, resources, same thing. As long as they have enough and everything else is secondary. And this is partly why militaries are usually very bad at carbon emissions. Military vehicles are often very high polluting vehicles. And it's because The main priority is to make sure the soldiers don't get killed and that they can get from A to B. Then, if there are extra resources and there is extra time, then they can go and try to improve carbon efficiency. But most armies don't have those resources and that time, not even the Americans. And so the group I was talking with also mentioned, why are the Americans the standard for waste? Maybe because they have the most resources and so they are able to waste the most. For a country that is not as rich as the United States, they will give their army more than the army needs, but there's a calculation, right? There's like a range of fluctuation of like how many people will maybe increase by the time the food gets there, how much of the food will go bad. You have to kind of gamble a little bit. But if you're as rich as the United States, you don't have to gamble. Just give them 3 times as much as they need. They absolutely will have enough. And that's probably why the Americans military are considered wasteful. And they are kind of wasteful as well. Um, Something else about the American military that is unique is that it is the only military with a global presence. Everywhere you go in the world, there will be a US military base somewhere nearby. So to keep all of these people fed, the US has also created stockpiles of resources and weapons and also long-lasting food. So like, for example, if the military has to go to the Middle East, they don't have to bring all of their food from the US to the Middle East. They have local bases with local stockpiles. The problem then becomes, if there is little military action in this place and there's not a lot of soldiers there, then the stockpiled food can go bad before it's eaten. So they operate under the same logic, right? We have to have enough food and resources everywhere just in case we need to fight here and our soldiers need the food. But if they don't need to fight here, that food can go bad. So it's even more wasteful. And all of this is related to that illness. The illness is killing the other side is more important than anything else. Which, you know, if you're not in a war, that is a completely insane way to think about things. Speaking of pollution, the US military is probably like up there near the #1 highest carbon polluters in the world. Even an organization as rich as the US military does not have the time and money to work on carbon efficient vehicles. And that's even before we get into like missiles and rockets, which use, and you know, fighter planes, which use even more carbon than regular cars. And you know, when we're talking about like military operations or any large scale operations, the principle is you have to make sure you can accomplish your mission first before you try to do something else. Like, you know, when you fly on an airplane, the flight attendant will always remind you, if there is a lack of oxygen and the masks come down, please put your own mask on before you help other people. Right? You have to make sure you're alive before you can help other people. Same thing for large scale operations. And so the reason that Saleh is talking about food is because he's reminded, as he's eating, he's reminded, like Saeed and I ate in East Africa all those years ago. Around us, there was unbearable hunger, but all we really cared to do at the Iranian Red Crescent headquarters was stuff ourselves and keep away the famine. The Red Crescent is the Islamic Muslim area version of the Red Cross. So their mission is to save people. But here we have a picture of people eating at Red Crescent headquarters while everyone around them starves. And the reason we have this picture is because the Red Crescent needs to make sure its own people can live first before they can help other people. And so if they don't have enough food for everybody, they will make sure their own people have enough first. Some of us might be interested in doing charity work or volunteer work. It is very important to remember that it is not heartless to put yourself first. If you are going out to help other people, the healthier and more energy, healthier you are and more energy you have, the more people you can help. So letting yourself starve so that other people have food is not a good plan in the long term. So even though this picture looks terrible, the reason it's a bad picture is not because Red Crescent people eat first. It's because Red Crescent didn't have enough food for everybody. And of course, you can't just blame Red Crescent because they depend on donations. Not enough people are donating money and food to help them solve that problem. This logic is also behind some of the really terrifying stories from the war in Kosovo in the late 90s. Do you guys know about this war? So in like 1998, 1999, in Southern Europe, I guess Southeastern Europe, um, Serbia and Montenegro, Kosovo, those countries, there was a genocide. And so the United Nations and NATO agreed to go in and try to stop the genocide. However, these Western countries were too cheap and they didn't send enough soldiers. So what happened was you had like a UN base in the middle, and they were supposed to be protecting civilians, but because the people around that base all wanted to kill the other side, and there were not enough UN soldiers, these soldiers did not go out and try to protect people, because if they did, they would all get killed. And so there were stories of UN soldiers being traumatized by having to look at people killing each other outside of the base, and they couldn't do anything to stop them. So like charity sounds nice, but it's not for the faint of heart. It does take courage. It does take effort. And it does sometimes lead you to face these really absurd, insane, heartbreaking images such as we see here. But this is for a good cause, charity. The same logic applies to armies, which you can say is not a good cause. Killing people, not everyone agrees is a good thing. But the similar logic applies. Themselves first, their mission first, and then they can think about whether they are able to help other people or like reduce waste, things like that. Questions about number 5 or today's discussion? Okay, so before next week, please finish up to the end of chapter 8. It's a longer chapter, so we're just reading one chapter this time. And I also went back and added something to the Moodle page. Here is I mentioned I have Twitter. Here is a series of tweets about one reason why it could be important to study literature. When I teach classes outside the IC, I have a Chinese language document about like tips on learning English and like, grammar, pronunciation, things like that. And this is part of it in Chinese. So I basically just found the English original and I posted it here. So if you're interested in that, you can take a look at that. Questions about anything? Okay, see you next week.